Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2+ Stuff, and today we are taking a look at the Daughters of Khaine battletome. Big thank you to Games Workshop for sending this to me early. Unfortunately, I haven't had a ton of time to look ahead at it, so we're going to be learning a lot of this together because, I'll be honest, I don't understand how this army works. It's one that I've never really had any experience with in real life, and since I don't really follow stats and competitive lists and that kind of thing, it'll be a fun little experiment for us together. And so what we're going to do in this video is take a look at the book as from a whole perspective, talk about mostly the allegiance abilities because they are the context that matter for every single unit in the book, and then just kind of have a discussion on my thoughts on it. Now, like I said, when I compared it to the Nighthaunt battletome that came out, I had a lot of thoughts on that one. That was a longer video. This is going to be a little bit shorter, just more of an overview, kind of getting you a sense of just what I think about the nature of storytelling when it comes to how do we translate an army of murder bikini, blenders into an actual functioning thing you put on the tabletop. So we're going to be doing a lot of that kind of discussion, and I hope that you enjoy it. With that being said, let's go down to the downward camp. So here we are with our Daughters of Khaine battletome. Let's crack her open. Any new lore is going to be covered on my video in later dates, but just like all the books that are getting updated to 3rd edition, there are some fantastic art pieces, maps, things like that. I feel like 3rd edition is really the one where armies feel very grounded in the realms, whereas before it was like, and then they just came out of nowhere. Like, well, okay, cool, nice. So let's go talk about army rules, okay? How do we translate Daughters of Khaine into rules? So, battle traits. Temples of Khaine, which is their sub-factions, so we're going to move past that. Battle Fury. This is a heroic action that you can carry out with one friendly Daughters of Khaine hero that is not a monster, instead of picking one from the table of core rules. If you do so, add 2 to the attack's characteristic of melee weapons used by that hero till the end of that turn. This heroic action doesn't matter if it has a mount. Interesting. You can field a lot of tiny heroes with Daughters of Khaine, and so that would be an interesting one because you can't do the same. Well, I guess you only get one heroic action anyway. I'm trying to think of why you would do this instead of, is it Finest Hour or something? Maybe I'll find that out later. Next is All-Out Slaughter. I just want to pause there. I do think it's cool that they're adding heroic actions as part of an allegiance ability. I like that quite a bit. All-Out Slaughter. You can use this command ability when a friendly Daughters of Khaine unit is picked to fight in the combat phase. The command must be issued from a Daughters of Khaine unit and received by the unit that has been picked to fight. I'm not sure why I had to spell that out. If the unmodified hit roll for an attack made by that unit in that phase is 6, it scores 2 hits instead of 1. You have to make a wound roll for each. So I really hate the clunky way that things are written nowadays because rules lawyers spoil fun. Just pick a unit and they get exploding 6s. Okay, neat, done, awesome. I like it. It's a great ability. It's just, my god. Fanatical Faith. Daughters of Khaine have a 6-up ward save. That's pretty cool. You can have a lot of bodies on the table with this army, so that's a neat idea. Next is Blood Rites. Before the battle, the Daughters of Khaine take part in holy rites of bloodletting. With each sacrifice, the faithful are imbued with a fraction of their god's furious power. Friendly Daughters of Khaine units gain an ability each battle round as shown below. Units have the abilities of the current battle round and each previous one. So unlike other, say the Deepkin, where every single turn they have their own thing, these unlock new abilities every single round, but you don't lose the old ones, which is a big difference. When we're looking at these, Quickening Bloodlust. Add 1 to run rolls for this unit. Okay, battle round 1, +1 to run, not a bad deal. Round 2, Headlong Fury, add 1 to charge rolls. Well, you're going to want them in combat, so that's useful. Round 3, Zealot's Rage. Add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons. You're not taking this army for the gun line. I mean, they have some cool shooting options, but it's not like a full cannonade. You're going to have some units in combat. That's a fantastic one. 4, Slaughterer's Strength. Add 1 to wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by this unit. So you have +1 to hit, and the next round is +1 to wound. And 5, which if you make it this far, I feel like you've won thoroughly. Daughters of Khaine have a ward of 5-up, which, I mean, alright. I can't think of a rule that they would have put in the 5th round that I was like, yeah, excited for, because most games are kind of over by then, but, it's there. Now, pausing here to talk about the allegiance abilities, this is much more concise than the Nighthaunt one. I think it is very accessible to new players, even if the army isn't always. When they had the last version of Blood Rights, I remember seeing, I've played against Daughters of Khaine by one person, my buddy Ben up in Washington, and he had these cool like tiles, and every turn he would flip one and it would give you the rules. So like you would have 5 of these things upside down so you couldn't see them. Round 1 he'd flip that one so you can see add 1 to charge rolls. Round 2 he would just flip the next one so now you can see both of these, and just kind of go down that way. And I thought that was a great system. I do hope they bring those same token things out for this army again to keep track of this, but I like it, and it's something that you have to think about whenever you look at any profile in this entire book. The bonuses to hit and wound only affect melee weapons, so that's important to know, because like I said, there are some good shooting units in this book. I'm just simply saying it's not like Carriage and Overlords where everything's strapped with a gun. The all-out slaughter is a fantastic ability. Exploding 6s to hit when you can dump a whole bunch of dice is nice. The only one that I'm just kind of perplexed by is Battle Fury, because even though I like getting heroic actions and stuff added, because I do think it allows, you know, certain armies to have more flavor and theme, add 2 to the attacks characteristic of a melee weapons is not stellar, you know, compared to like +1 to your save and wound rolls. I don't know. We'll find out. Moving over to enhancements, there are some really interesting ones. I'm going to go through and just kind of paraphrase them, but there are some incredibly interesting ones. Like the Nighthaunt book, I was like, it's all right. There's a few standouts, but with this, there's multiple that like these have massive ramifications for an army. So let me tell you what I mean. First up, Arcane Mastery, wizards only. The general knows all of the spells from the spell lore in this book, which we'll get to in a second here. It's on page 7. Yeah, it knows all of them. And there have traditionally been some pretty stinking good spells in their spell lore, so assuming that hasn't changed too much, that's massive. I like this one here. It's for Melusa Iron Scales only. It's the newer hero they got. Fueled by revenge, once per battle at the start of the combat phase, you can say that this general will wreak Kane's vengeance, and if you do so, till the end of that phase, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly Melusai units wholly within 12 inches of the general, and don't forget, she is a Melusai unit. So I like that just because I like this idea of a hero and their entourage just being like, you know, once more into the breach, and then she just commands her little squad to go up and wreak havoc. I thought that was great. The standout one for large blocks of witch elves, definitely going to be Zealous Orator. If this general issues the rally command, you can return 1 slain model to that unit for each 4-up instead of 6. Massive. Massive, massive. It made so much sense for Fire Slayers. I mean, I guess they're similar in the sense that they are horde-based armies to an extent. I feel like it made more sense over there, but I do like this for them. True Believer, you can add 1 to the current battle round for the Blood Rights thing, so your general is always operating 1 ahead of everybody. But since these are mostly melee focused, I don't think that's necessarily the best use of your command traits. There's very few times, like when you talk about the, you know, I guess force multiplication that Zealous Orator gives you, or Arcane Mastery, or something like that. It's hard to say that that's the best choice. Another interesting one here, though, is Master of Poisons. At the end of the combat phase, if any wounds caused by this general's attacks were allocated to any models on the battlefield in that phase, pick 1 of those models. That model suffers d6 mortal wounds. Important to note, and it's not like the most insane ability, but the reason I note that one is because it is a model by model basis. So if one of these guys nicks a Chaos Warrior who has 2 wounds and does 1 wound to them, then you're rolling a d6 to see if you can do 1 wound to that specific Chaos Warrior, not the unit. So awesome against like Gargants or something where it is a unit of 1 model, but just kind of keep that in mind. You know, of course, it's still great against things like Knights Draconis or, you know, Fulminators, really just anything from the Stormcast book. Anything with multiple wounds is going to be more hard-pressed. But if you're throwing it at a 2-wound unit, just kind of keep that in mind, that you're not applying it to the unit. It's a model-by-model ability. Now I'm just going to highlight a few of these artifacts and stuff like that. Remember, these can stack with your command traits. You give your general the artifact. I'm just going to pick the ones that stand out to me. I love the Crown of Woe. Enemy units cannot receive the Rally or Inspiring Presence command while they are within 9 inches of the bearer. In addition, if any enemy models are slain by wounds caused by the bearer's attacks, increase the range of this ability to 15 inches for the remainder of the battle. That is terrific. If you can get it, because, you know, I wouldn't overextend your heroes. They're not the most tanky, of course. But if you can get it, 15-inch bubble of no inspiring presence and no rally is brutal. And it's not wholly within, it's just within because it's affecting enemies. I like that one a lot. Especially, it's just one of those things that puts more pressure on your opponent that they don't already need. Moving over to the artifacts, I actually like all the ones for wizards. The bear can attempt... the first one is Crystal Heart. It doubles the range that endless spells are placed at, which is nice. Quite a bit nicer than a lot of other cool things other factions have for endless spells. You also have the Sevenfold Shadow. It's a teleportation, which doesn't sound like much, but when you talk about how much heroes matter for this army, being able to pluck one up and then put it somewhere else is really nice. And then Shadow Stone, add one to the casting rolls. And I just like that one because if you chose the knows every spell from the spell lore Arcane Mastery thing, that's a nice little combo. And then for this set down here, there's only 2 for priests, because remember, Daughters of Khaine is one of those very few factions that have prayers and spells. It just seems like most armies go one or the other, but they, like Stormcast, have it all. Blood Sigil is just picking an extra prayer, and then Khainite Pendant is once per game, you can make it go on automatically, you don't have to roll for it. I'm going to breeze through the lores real quick here. This is the spell lore and prayers. The spell lore is a really cool toolbox one, and I can absolutely see the case for the Arcane Mastery to be used. For example, you have one that just increases the movement characteristic to 16 inches and gives fly to the caster, which, just for the purposes of delivering a hero where he needs to be, or she needs to be, of course, in this case, is wonderful. Pit of Shades is a mortal wound bomb. Mirror Dance is one that I don't remember seeing before. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But you essentially pick 2 Daughters of Khaine heroes and you get to switch them, which is a neat idea, especially when you talk about how different the Daughters of Khaine heroes can be. You can have very, very cheap ones that are just there to deliver buffs, kind of like cheerleaders, and then you have like the Iron Scale Melusa who are actually competent fighters, and so bait and switching your opponent is a neat... It just sounds fun. I don't know if it's good, but it sounds fun as heck. The Withering is, you basically, pick an enemy unit and everyone gets +1 to wound rolls for attacking them, which is great. Mind Razor makes a return and is still deadly as ever. It improves the rend characteristic of the melee weapons by 1, and then in addition to that, you add 1 to the damage characteristic if they made a charge move. Again, you're going to have a lot of very speedy AF girls running across the board doing charges. You're going to want Mind Razor. Even if you just take the cheapest, tiniest hero to even have the possibility of it, it's a great spell. Last one is Shroud of Despair. Shroud of Despair is a spell, has a casting value of 4, a range of 18. Pick an enemy unit within range and subtract 1 from that unit's bravery characteristic until your next hero phase. If the casting roll was an 8+, subtract a D3 from that unit's bravery characteristic. It's fine. I feel like there's not nearly as many things that trigger off of bravery, which they did before. So that one's a little bit like, it's kind of a nod to the old stuff, but it doesn't feel very impactful, if that makes sense. Looking over at the prayer scriptures, to make it very, very simple, they have Catechism of Murder, which is a copy and paste of that command that they can issue. What's that one called? All Out Slaughter. It just gives them exploding 6s to hit. Now they don't stack together because you have to choose one ability or not to trigger on the 6s, so they end up being a wash, but it does give you more units that you can apply those same rules to, so that's a great one, Catechism of Murder. They also have a reroll for their 6-up ward here, so if the prayer goes off, pick a unit, they get to re-roll that 6 up, so that's kind of cool. And of course it goes to a 5-up on the last round, and that would be re-rollable as well. None of the other ones really stood out to me in a massive way. Sacrament of Blood is a prayer that lets you pick a Daughters of Khaine unit and they act as if they are 1 step ahead on the, every turn gets a new ability or rule. They act like it's 1 turn further than it is. There's a auto pass battle shock, and one thing I wanted to point out here is Crimson Rejuvenation. You pick a unit and they heal D3 wounds. Now that doesn't sound like much, and to be honest, it's not. But I wanted to point out here that not a lot of battle tomes have healing prayers and or spells. A lot of them are more utility focused or damage focused, of course. And I just want to start pointing these out in the future because they've started doing rules like in the Maggotkin of Nurgle with the disease tokens or contagion tokens, whatever they're called. You can heal those away. And so rules like this do matter. if you are worried or concerned about playing against a Maggotkin of Nurgle opponent. Just kind of keep that in the back of your head. If you want more on that information, just go check out my Maggotkin and Nurgle rule review. Now we have 6 temples to look at here. I'm going to bust through them pretty stinking fast. Hagnar, which is typically like the poster girls, if you will. Daughters of the First Temple. Add 1 to the current battle round when determining the abilities gained by Hagnar and their blood rights. Okay, so everybody else, they start on turn 2. Everybody else starts turn 1. That's kind of neat, and I like its consistency and ease of remembrance. Draki Ganeth, Bladed Killers. Improve the rend characteristic of weapons, melee weapons specifically, used by Draki Ganeth Witch Elves. And Sisters of Slaughter. So your basic units have an improved rend value, which, let's take a quick second and see what they have. Okay, so looking at them, this, like I said, it's your basic infantry options. Neither of them actually have rend. I think that is compelling. Anytime I can get rend on the basic unit that I have, it just increases their threat level quite a bit. Also keep in mind, these guys can be rolling buckets of attacks. Man, you know, they really can. Add 1 to wound rolls if they're near a totem, which all of the big, what do you call them, cauldrons are. These guys get to move an extra 3 inches. They can move in pile 6, which is terrific. Yeah, there's a bunch of great things about them. They can do a lot of attacks, is really what I'm getting at. But all of that matters a lot when they increase their rend. Keltnar, sorry. Strike and Fade. Friendly Keltnar units can retreat and still charge in the same turn. Boom, that is pure fire. Retreat and charge is just one of the best. We just talked about it in the Night Haunt book, that you can create a situation where your units are so hard to pin down, or you can, much to your opponent's surprise, like gang up on particular units. If you put 3 units out front, they all get charged, and then on your turn, you retreat 3, and then they all go into one target. You can super annihilate something very, very easily. There's a lot of different levers you can pull when you're not pinned down in combat. Next is Kalebron, which is traditionally my favorite, just in terms of like their scheme and stuff like that, very shadow focused. You can use this command ability at the end of your movement phase. The command can only be issued by a friendly Kalebron hero, and the unit that receives the command must be a Kalebron unit. Remove the unit that receives this command from the battlefield and set it up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches. So you get a teleport, but in a game where capping scenarios is key, it's just a cool little thing that you can keep in your pocket that your opponent has got to constantly be aware of. So there's no leaving objectives bare at all. And for that, I like that kind of stuff. It certainly, like, things like that became very useful. Beasts of Chaos used to have something like that. We used to be able to summon stuff in from the board edge, and I would regularly get objectives because opponents just lost sight of the fact that, oh yeah, his beast, his army's on the other side of the table. It's nowhere near these objectives. Surely I can pull a guy off. It's like, I'm waiting for you. Next is the Kraith, Disciples of Slaughter. After a friendly Kraith Sisters of Slaughter unit, which is they're like basic melee, one of the ones we talked about. For the first time in the combat phase, roll a dice. On a 4-up, that unit can fight for a second time in that phase. The Strike Last effect applies when they fight that second time. So that makes perfect sense. They get to go again, but you got to do it at the end. You're going to want some marker to reflect that. What I like about it, though, let's see, when a friendly Sisters of Slaughter unit has fought for the first time. So my understanding from the way that this is written is if you have 3 units of Sisters of Slaughter, all of them get to make that roll, right? And let's say one of them succeeds, like you would get a sum total of 4 attacks in, 1, 2, 3, and then the bonus one at the end of the round because they strike last. So, okay, that's cool. That's my reading of it. If I'm wrong and it only affects like that first one, let me know. Next is Xentharkai. Kane's Essence. Each time a model in a friendly Xentharkai Melusai unit is slain, the model can fight before it's removed from play. It doesn't matter too much for the ranged ones that they have right here in the picture, but the what are they like this? The polearm spear girls, they're gonna like that a lot. We'll cover Path to Glory in a dedicated video, of course. I've been doing a lot of those on the channel. And for this one, you know, I'm not gonna go into the grand strategies and battle tactics simply because they really tend to just be reprints, but worse, of the core book ones. And the events that I play locally, like they just use the GHB ones. So I don't know. I'm just gonna pass on that one. But what's interesting is they have some core battalions. I don't know if you're gonna want them, but you get let's see, probably the most interesting one is the Shadow Patrol, which is going to be Doomfire Warlocks and 4 units of Khaine Warriors. There makes them a 1-drop, but this is essentially all of your flanking units, all the things that you would want in a list to just go there and cause havoc on the sides or play for objectives or be aggressive, counterpunch. It's all there and it's all awesome. The other one here is Vampiric Guard, and that is your big Morathi one if you want it. It can easily fill an entire army, but it's just her and all her snake ladies in one battalion. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the individual war scrolls. I never do when I do these kinds of videos. I just want enough of the allegiance abilities to try and put some of these units in context. So notable standout heroes to me are going to be honestly your cheapest and then your biggest. So for example, is it the Hag Queen? Yes, the Hag Queen I believe is the cheaper of them all. Essentially, it's a little priest bot, so you can just have a bunch of these little cheap girls running around. What are the price points on the Hag Queen? Is 110. I feel like that went up quite a bit since the last time. The Gladiatrix is still at 90, so that's cool. You know, looking at the prices on these in terms of the point price, I mean, man, there's quite a bit going on here that is interesting. I'm looking here. So I am looking at the special notes here. So Drykey Ganeth can include 1 reinforced or double reinforced Witch Elves unit in addition to other reinforced units it can include. Very nice idea. Thank you, Games Workshop, for entering that design space of, hey, this is a horde army. We're going to let you horde. Thank you. Let's see. Hag Queen on Cauldron of Blood. Single. A Hagnar army can include 1 Cauldron of Blood in addition to other behemoth unit it can include. Okay, so it just gets an extra behemoth slot for that unit. And same thing for the Cauldron of Blood there. Hagnar loves them. Blood Sisters are battle line in a Xentharkai army. So these are going to be your Snake Ladies are good in the Snake Lady sub-faction, go figure. And then Shadow Stalkers. Khaine Shadow. So is that the Underworlds? Not Underworlds. Yeah, Warcry Warband. Here we go. Khaine Shadow Stalkers. They can be battle line in Kalebron, which is an interesting thing. I guess that makes perfect sense. They are kind of like the Realm of Shadow ones, and this is kind of their jam too. That is a very interesting concept that I had not considered, but they seem interesting. And looking at the points here, Morathi clocks in at 680, Bloodrack Shrine at 200. I'm just picking out big names so that we can kind of get a sense of where the point balance is. Your basic Witch Elf for a 10-girl unit is 115 points. That's not that much. I mean, they're going to die to a stiff breeze because they're not nearly as durable as they used to be, but they can do a lot of work if they reach their target. I'll be honest, when I look at this, with the allegiance abilities they have, where it's not about save stacking and it's not about having bravery higher than your opponents and stuff like that, it looks to me like they've dialed in the army to be pretty succinct and like, hey, here's what you do. You run forward and you murder things, which sounds like it should be pretty simple and straightforward, but they tuned it in a very awkward way before, whereas now I feel like you really are going to be playing on that knife's edge between, if my units touch something, they explode. Right, whatever these things touch just dies, but they have to make it there, and that is the trade-off. I like that glass cannon kind of feel. They did not feel like a glass cannon before, they just felt like a cannon when they first launched. I remember that because my buddy, like I said before, had the army. But this is terrific. In terms of conveying a story, I like their lores in terms of the spell lore and the prayer list, because there's a lot of utility. There's just a lot of different circumstances. I didn't cover all of them, but you have quite a few tools in the toolbox there, which is nice, and I like that in factions where there's not as many unit options. Like, predominantly you're going to pick a strategy and kind of lean into it, so whether that's Snake Ladies or huge blocks of Witch Elves or, anything in between there, but you're gonna have a staple of units that you use for any given army. And so having a toolbox that can change, modify, and work with that choice in an interesting way, I think is a slam dunk. So overall, I thoroughly like it. I'm so excited to get into their Path to Glory rules to see how their story is presented. In terms of the sub-factions, I will say this is one of the most interesting in terms of like the spread. The spread meaning, you know, some are playing with their allegiance ability, the blood rights thing. Others are rewarding you for very specific units, letting you attack multiple times, retreat, and charge. Like there's just a lot of different levers that are being pulled. So if there's a play style that appeals to you, one of these has to have it, right? Like the only thing that's really not ever mentioned is, I guess, like magic and prayers in any of these, and then you have command abilities and artifacts to kind of represent that side of things. But in terms of like how you want your army to look or function, I feel like a lot of bases are covered here, and that's a great thing for sub-factions. They should be that way. And also I feel like there's a couple good ones. Like I just don't want to go back to the days where everybody chooses the same one. That's boring. But retreat and charge is exceptionally powerful. Giving rend to that many attacks for your basic infantry in this army is exceptional. Because all those abilities, you know, exploding sixes and all kinds of bonuses to wound and hit, and we haven't even gotten to like all out attack or anything. They're phenomenal. Yeah, so I like it. I hope that none of them become like the default. I can't see one off the top of my head that I'm like instant. Yes. But, you know, I'm sure someone will point that out to me. But friends, let's go to the upward cam and kind of get some final thoughts. So my final thoughts on the Daughters of Khaine battletome. I'm always very honest in these videos. I didn't know much about the army before. I did not know a whole lot about their standing in 2nd edition. I knew that heroes were being added, and I just personally was not keeping up with what they added to the army, meaning the Melusa Iron Scale, now the Gladiatrix. Giving it a bit more context, I will say I really appreciate how simple their allegiance abilities are. We just talked about the Night Haunt one in my other video. They have a lot of text. It's all good, but it's a lot of text. And something I always say to folks when they're trying to come up with, like, you know, what ability should they use or focus on is the rule, the mediocre rule that you remember is better than the fantastic rule that you forget. Meaning, this is easy to remember. You will easily be able to recall all of the allegiance abilities that your army has going at any given time. All you have to do is just know the battle round, and then you can pretty much get everything, right? At the Night Haunt, they have like stuff happening every time someone charges. You have to figure that out. Nope, this is just very straightforward. Your units get better as the game goes on. However, they also die to a stiff breeze, so you're going to have fewer of them the longer things go. Having such a big utility, spell lore and prayer lore, not even that, I say utility, it's not even that they're doing, you know, spectacular things, but they're just letting you engage with different parts of the battletome and the game in general. And that's what I like to see. Because if nothing else, you can just choose things that you normally wouldn't, like say for a demo game. If I was giving a demo to someone, I'd choose crazy lists that don't make any sense, and they still sound fun, you know? I like that. So all in all, it gets a thumbs up from me. I'm very excited. I do have a couple friends here locally that are interested in Daughters of Khaine, and so I'm very excited to see what they can do with this battletome, because I think they play a game similar to my Bone Splitters, which is, you know, just the basics of Warhammer. Run forward and punch someone in the face, but they do it in a very fun and interesting way. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope to report back on all of the witch elves that I have slain very, very soon. Thank you all so much for watching, and happy wargaming.